if you want, like, let's get into it, dude.
Yeah.
Buckle up. Let's get after it and start this ride.
Well, I know I talked to you on the phone a couple of weeks ago, and you said that you were still trying to process everything that happened and sort of come to terms with it and find your way back into society. And I can appreciate that. It took some time to think this thing over. So it sounds like quite the adventure. It sounds like we've got a good story ahead of us.
Yeah, it was, a big mountain expedition like that. It's 6 weeks. We spent on the mountain, so definitely a lot of experiences. It's a big thing. You're up there for a long time, see a lot of things, do a lot of things. So definitely, after finishing something like that and getting home, yeah, it's a lot to process for sure. I mean, I know you can relate because I've kind of went through some of the similar things, just even after an event, after an ultra, you have this goal, this objective that you're chasing and you're striving for in preparation, for so long, and then you get it done, and it's almost like, you kind of, now what, it's like,
Mhm.
it takes a long time. I noticed that with myself anyway, after races or bigger events, like, it took me a good few weeks. Like, say after Moab, I think it was nearly a month when finally Michelle and I were having a conversation. I'm like, hey, we ran 240 miles. Like, that was kind of cool, but it took me that long, because you're so focused on the here and the now, my nutrition, my hydration, the time or the finish, whatever. Like, it takes a while for you to process and step back and look at big picture objectively, like, wow, okay, I just went through all of this, and you kind of start appreciating it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, what I appreciate about you is you're a Green Beret and you've done a lot of big things in your life. You've done a lot of badass stuff, and you just come across as really humble and very little ego. Is that something you have to consciously work on, or does that come natural for you? I get, it's probably an embarrassing question, but
Yeah, it is. Just like I told you before, when we did the first episode, this for me is out of my comfort zone. And I don't know. I don't know how or why. Maybe it's just the kind of the way I was raised, but I don't enjoy talking about myself at all. Especially with what I do, and the people I surround myself with, I all of my, like, close friends, and my family, everybody I surround myself with these people for a purpose, and I look up to all of them. And so for me, I look up to them. There's no reason for me to talk about myself. Like, I want to talk about them. I learn and I listen and I follow them. And so for me, I don't really see any reason to talk about myself, I guess.
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know.
As we're
Yeah.
about to jump into a 60 to 90-minute podcast about you. No, I mean,
know.
I
Yeah.
get it. I get it. It makes sense. And I appreciate that answer. But let's go back, man. Like, what was the inception of the Mount Everest project? Like, how did it start? How did you decide on Everest rather than another peak or another big project? What was the seed that ended up blossoming into this big thing?
Yeah, I guess so. I mentioned before, Michelle and we did the trek to Everest Base Camp back in 2018. And so back then, getting up into the Khumbu, getting into the Himalaya, and, especially seeing Everest and all these just beautiful, big, incredible mountains, that really kind of set a hook in me. Just growing up here in Colorado, I have just always found my happiness and my passion from being in and moving through the mountains. So it kind of started then, but then it really, I guess, took hold at Moab 240, 2020, my first attempt. And one of the athletes, one of the runners I logged quite a few miles with, his name is Zach. We logged miles through the race and talked and hung out. And then after the race, he kind of hit me up and we started chatting. He, does some mountaineering and ski mountaineering and stuff on his own. And then he'd gone through some courses, and he had talked about wanting to put something together to climb Everest. And I'm like, and he invited me on. And then from there, I kind of began the planning process. This is a year and a half ago, or actually a year and a half before I left. So a while out. And I just kind of looked at it, in life, like, you always have the by the book way to do things, to approach things, right? So if you want to get into 100-miler, you start out, maybe your first race is a 5K, and then you work yourself up, maybe do a half marathon, a marathon, 50K, so on and so forth. And maybe, over the course of, 12 to 24 months, maybe longer, you attempt your first 100-mile race. Well, with big mountain climbing, it's no different. And especially Everest, because like you can research, read, watch documentaries, listen to professional guides, mountaineers, people with a lot of experience. And it's pretty adamant. Like, you absolutely have to have a technical background in mountaineering, mountain climbing. But you also have to, by the book, work up in this progression of climbing mountains and climbing peaks, working your way to high altitude. So like starting at Mount Kilimanjaro, for instance, that summit is 19,700 feet. Cool, maybe people check that off, and then they go to Denali or Aconcagua, and they do all of these mountains working up in preparation for Everest. Not to mention, what's very common and very highly recommended is to do other 8,000 meter peaks before Everest, just getting up to that extreme high altitude. So you have that experience. So you know how your body's going to respond. Can you adapt? Can you even move and function that high? But bring in and have this skill set and this knowledge before attempting this mountain. But for me, and my lifestyle, my job, with what I do, I've kind of learned over the years, like, life isn't always perfect. Like, sometimes you're going to get presented an opportunity, and if it's something you want, something you're passionate about, you have to get after it, and you have to figure out a way to make it work. And mind you, being smart, putting in the training, putting in the work, doing the research, being dedicated and intelligent with what you're doing. But I mean, that's life, man. Like, I've had a lot of things that I hate to say accomplished, but I have gotten through or gotten done, just simply because the opportunity presented itself, and I knew it was something I was passionate about, and I just went after it. And I just, you just put your cards on the table, like, hey, I don't know if I'm going to make this work, but we're going to give it a go and see what happens. And that's kind of, it's kind of how Everest ended up working out. Just this opportunity presented itself, and then I had 18 months to wrap my head around and figure out how I'm going to, get with an organization, how I'm going to make this work with my job, how am I going to get this thing funded, how am I going to prepare myself. And I just went deep into it, man. Once I had the conversation with Michelle, and I knew she supported it, like, bless her heart, she's incredible. Once she fully gave me the green light, it's okay, we're gonna make this happen and gonna give it a shot.
Mm-hmm. So what did that 18 months look like leading up to this? I mean, I just imagine with a project like this, you would have to be so singularly focused on this one thing, but there's a lot of pieces to this big puzzle. There's training, diet, nutrition, like you said, the funding, but yeah, how did you map out that 18 months?
Yeah. So initially, we really got heavy into the planning in, I guess it was January of 21. And once we got into that, got going, fortunately, again, with my job as a mountaineering instructor, I'm constantly in the mountains anyway. So, I'm moving, it's keeping me fit. I'm working on my on my technical proficiency. And so that works hand in hand, both during the summer and the winter. And then, pursuing ultras, that was a great source of training and fitness for me. And, living here in Colorado, there's no better fitness than running 14ers. And that's what I enjoy doing anyway. I love getting up to higher elevation, get above tree line, moving through the mountains, big days in the mountains. So I just kind of really kept doing what I do, what I would be doing anyway, for training, but I definitely ramped it up. And then also, I went back to Moab, for a second attempt after my initial DNF. And so that train up, was much bigger and much more focused than my first Moab train up. So now in the back of my mind, all year long, I've got, okay, Moab 240, that's coming in October. Like I got to get after it. There's absolutely no way I cannot not finish this race this year. I have to execute. And then in the back of my mind is like, okay, that's October. I know in the spring, I'm going to be going on expedition to attempt this climb. So it gave me a lot of fuel and just a lot of mental focus and drive to make the most out of every day that I could. The funding, as I'm sure you can imagine, that's big, man. That was definitely, a big hurdle for me, and trying to figure that out. I was so fortunate to get in contact with Green Beret Racing after Moab and to be brought on to their organization, and they helped support me, for this climb, supported in a huge way. And I think I'm pretty confident that I would have found a way to make it work. But I'll tell you what, man, if it wasn't for all of the people, and I'm talking like individuals, not big businesses and companies, I'm talking individuals that paid out of their pocket to donate, to Green Beret Racing and directly to me to give me this opportunity to try to climb Everest. I mean, it was unbelievable, man. It really takes me back. Like if that hadn't happened, I don't know how I would have made it work, at this point. So that, there was a lot. And then, not to mention, I am active duty. So it's like, it's funny because there were 15 of us total on this expedition. And most people, they got time off or they were in between jobs or different things. Like, well, I don't have that luxury. And so the fact that my unit in the Army granted me 2 months of vacation to go attempt this thing. And then on top of that, they know what I'm attempting to do, because I got phone calls and I had people ask me like, hey, are you just trekking up to like base camp or what are you doing? I'm like, nah, dude, I'm going to try to climb it. They're like, oh, okay. So it as you can imagine, like it turned into a pretty real thing. There was a lot of risk that they took to allow me to attempt that mountain. And there've been other individuals in the past who have been active duty service members trying to do things similar to this, and they get denied. So just the fact that I was allowed to go attempt this is pretty incredible, and I couldn't be more fortunate, more thankful for that. And then with those 6 weeks on the mountain, I bring that experience back now to share with our students and people that we put through the course. And that was really big for me. You never want to teach or instruct any bit of information strictly out of a book, right? Or like a PowerPoint presentation. Like you have to have real life, real world experience. Yeah. So if I'm giving a class on how to treat hypothermia or frostbite, or the effects of high altitude, like now I can speak from experience. And I think in my profession especially, that holds a lot of weight. So I'm really looking forward to future classes and being able to hopefully give our students a little bit more training and real world experience.
Yeah. Well, you've got the experience now, it sounds like. If you don't mind, tell us about your job. Tell us what it looks like on the day to day.
Yeah, so I'm here. I'm based out of Fort Carson, 10 Special Forces Group, and I'm a military mountaineering instructor at the Special Operations Mountain Warfare Training Center. So uh, we run our schoolhouse for all of SOF, so all of Special Operations Forces. So it could be Green Berets, Rangers, SEALs, but only SOF. And they come through our schoolhouse, and we run 2 summer courses and 1 winter course each year. And we take these special operations soldiers and we get them on the rock during the summer. We teach them how to rock climb, and that starts out pretty basic, setting up top ropes. Then we'll work into sport climbing. Then we'll let them lead sport climbs so they can clip bolts and they're, pretty safe. And then we get into traditional gear placements, and we step our way through this process, getting into very technical routes, technical climbing, multi-pitch climbing. We work a lot of technical rope systems, rescues, loads, stuff like that. And then we get them into the Alpine, and, we summit 14ers during these courses via technical routes, but obviously, being military, it's not just it's not just a casual day out at the crag. Our students, once they are technically proficient and they're safe on the rock and in the mountains, they'll throw on an 80-pound pack with all of their gear, their weapons, their full loadout. So each person has, could be upwards of 100 pounds that they're carrying total weight. And now they're leading 5-8 pitches. They're moving through multi-pitch rock routes. They're summiting exposed ridge lines at 14,000 feet. And so they're doing all the things that, we kind of do, as, weekend hobbies for fun, but they're doing this with weight on their back. And then on top of that, they have to think about all the tactical considerations and the military training and focus, right? And then in the winter, we do the same thing, man. It's a fire hose, and our students are so incredibly intelligent and able to receive and apply information so quickly. They've been through selection processes, they've been tested, they've been evaluated. And so we are working with the absolute professional soldiers, in the military, sailors, Marines. But in the winter, it's the same thing. We take guys who have never skied before. We take them to a resort for 2 weeks. That's it. We teach them how to ski. And then we have extreme terrain roped off, and we have critical tasks that they have to pass. Some of them don't pass the ski test, but if they do, we immediately go into the backcountry, and this is after 2 weeks of skiing. So we give them classes and instruction on, snow science, avalanche safety, rescue, all of these things. And then we go right into the backcountry, get into ice climbing, and then we do winter ascents of 14ers. We do extreme cold weather survival, to where they're building snow caves. We throw them in the water and make them survive for 36 hours after being, frozen and nearly hypothermic. So, like I said, with my job, it worked out very well for me as a train up in itself for this, it actually worked out quite well. Right before I left for Nepal, we were finishing our course, and where we were doing our cold weather survival, it was 38 below, and we were out there for a week. And it was great. It was perfect. It's like, oh, sweet. I've got this down suit. I've got these big boots, my -40 bag. Perfect. And so I just use that, kind of gear prep and testing all of my stuff. Yeah.
Wow. It sounds like, with your profession, you're teaching the best of the best how to survive in the mountains in the worst conditions possible. It seems like, and forgive my naivete, but it seems like Everest wouldn't be that tough for you. It seems like you would go over there and you're teaching the Sherpas how to survive, but
no, No, man, the Sherpa there, oh man, they really are incredible. So strong and so proficient at what they do. But it did give me, uh, it gave me the confidence that I knew. I was very confident in my technical proficiencies and whatever would be needed or expected of me on the mountain as far as climbing ropes, mountaineering, rescue, anchors, ice screws, all this stuff. The technical side of it, I was quite confident with. I've been in, I've been in cold weather. Even just not even with my job, but living here in Colorado where I do, like you spend enough winters outdoors. I think there's a lot to be said about just having a mountain sense. Understanding what the mountains are telling you, what the weather's telling you, what are the clouds doing, what are the winds doing, how's your body reacting, and adapting. One thing with me, I have, I have rheumatoid arthritis, so that plays kind of into my decision making, and then I also have Raynaud's disease, so I naturally have poor circulation, right, to my hands and feet, and with my job, we're out all winter, skiing, touring, ice climbing, doing these things. So I've had to learn how to adapt, like with my hands, if your hands go, you can't do anything. So learning, at any given time, I'll have 2 or 3 separate pairs of gloves on me in the winter, keeping them in places so they're always warm, they're drying out. I have chemical hand warmers. I have different things. I have gloves to do rope technical work with, and then I have gloves to ski tour with, or I have gloves to ski descent, like warmer gloves, and so really just living here in Colorado and doing what I do gave me a very, I think kind of a well-rounded base to start to go for this. What I didn't know, and I had no idea about, was how my body would adapt at extreme high altitude. Because again, before this attempt, the highest I had ever been was Kilimanjaro at 19,700 feet, roughly 6,000 meters. And, and I was pretty intimidated, especially once I got into country and I met the rest of the team members on this expedition. I know you talked to Morgan, you heard his background, the mountains he had climbed before multiple times at altitude. And a lot of the other team members were the same way. And a lot of the other team members had done multiple 8,000 meter peaks. Okay. And so it's like, cool. Well, here I am. I haven't done any of that stuff. I've been up to the top of Kili, which is a hike, during the summer. Sure. And I'm sitting here, telling myself I'm going to attempt this thing without the use of supplemental oxygen. Like it was pretty big, and I was pretty intimidated. But I knew I kind of had to just mentally kind of constantly just recenter myself, don't think too far ahead, don't think too big, focus on the day, focus on the process, and, train, do what I can and listen to my body as I go up. If I go up and something happens, it happens. But there's no use in me overthinking this and dwelling on this and intimidating myself to the point to where I'm so fearful that I don't even try, I don't even start. Because I think a lot of times that happens to folks. I've seen that happen. And it's kind of heartbreaking because I'm sure, you've got friends, you got people, they said, oh, I want to do this, or I want to do this race, I want to do this event, do this thing, but they allow their mind to control them, and the fear of the unknown ends up debilitating them to where some people don't even try. Yeah. And you do enough things and you put yourself out there enough times, I really think you can come to learn that that fear of the unknown is never as bad as you think it is. Once you get into it and you put your head down and you start this process, it's just like anything else. You just work through it. But that was definitely a concern for me and something I really had to kind of work through as it went on.
Yeah. And to your credit, you really put it out there into the world, what you're going to be doing. You're sharing it with people. You're trying to raise money. podcasts, social media, like letting people know this is my plan. And I may fall down on my face, but this is what I'm going for.
Yeah, and obviously there's a couple reasons with that. Like I said, Green Beret Racing, they brought me on in October, and it's such an incredible organization. They're opening up opportunities, just like this opportunity for me, right? This really trying to combat in any way they can, the post-traumatic stress and then traumatic brain injury by just getting individuals out and find something you're passionate about. They'll fund it, they'll support it, just to get people out and really kind of striving and pushing again. So it was really important for me to do, as much as I could for that organization to support them, because it doesn't end with my expedition. I'm really hoping this is just kind of the kicking off point, to get more individuals involved, more guys involved, like let's get out, let's do this together. And now, like, I came home and there's a half dozen new guys that are on our human performance team doing mountain bike races and getting into ultras and doing other events, and it's like, dude, it's so cool to see. And so I told you when we did the first episode, like, this is really putting me out of my comfort zone, and it's a big stretch for me to do this, and especially like with my background and everything. You don't talk about what you're going to do. You go out, you execute, you get it done, and you let your work do the talking. And that's very much my mindset, especially when it comes to mountains or chasing big objectives, because there's so many things that can go wrong. And I'm not a big, I don't know, I hate to say this, but I'm not a big social media guy, and it's really hard for me. It's actually really hard for me to put anything out on social media. And so kind of going out there and talking about it and putting it out, like, hey, I'm going to go do this thing. I see that a lot, and it's just not the way I am.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather just kind of go try to do something. If I get it done, cool, and not be that. But really coming into with GBR, it really opened up my eyes a little bit. It's like, okay, if you're really going to do this and you're really going to try to be an example for other dudes and, get people out and start pursuing, their own passion and things that they want to go after, like, you got to put it out there, and you got to put everything on the table. And so I kind of looked at it as like, yeah, I'm putting a lot on the table right now, because not only am I going to go attempt this, but I'm sitting here telling people I'm going to go attempt this. I know good and well that if I fail and I royally screw this up, I've just blasted it out on podcasts, on Instagram. And it's like, yeah, this dude talked all over the place and then he fell flat on his face, So I knew that. But the weight and the potential outcome of what I could do and what we could do with Green Beret Racing to, raise money and raise awareness and help other dudes, like, it was totally worth it. And I just knew when it came time for me to start putting in work on the mountain, I couldn't screw it up. I had to get after it. So
yeah, it's like, you didn't give yourself a way to back out. Like, I mean, sure, you can fall down on your face publicly, but who wants to do that? So it's, yeah, I mean, did you learn anything from that experience? Do you feel like you were able to grow at all by putting yourself out there and sort of stepping out of your comfort zone?
I did, yeah. And I think for me, it really helped. And one of my senior leaders, he really put it to me in a good way that resonated. He's like, hey man, I know you. I know that you're not the type of person that likes to do these things, but you're not doing it for you. You're doing it for the organization. You're doing it for your brothers. Like, you're doing it to help other dudes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, think of it like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it just kind of gave me the opportunity, because leading by example is a really big thing with me. And, because it's big in my community for guys just to talk to one another, if something's off, right? Like, if I've got stuff going on in my head, or I've got stuff I'm dealing with that's kind of in a dark place, I never want to think I never want anyone to think less of me, that Jason's weak or Jason, is dealing with depression or whatever it may be. Right.
Right.
But I kind of looked at it like, all right, this is just another avenue, another form for me to try to help my guys and try to be that example. Like, yeah, like put yourself put yourself out there. And it's just something else, another challenge, and that's how we grow. That's how we improve and evolve as people.
Yeah, that is how we grow, man. I mean, for me in my life, and obviously it's a little bit different than your story, but you acquire these skills and you're sort of into whatever it is you're into, whether it's ultra running, or for me, I was into martial arts for years. And then you're kind of doing it for yourself. Maybe there's some ego involved, but then eventually, I don't know if it comes with age or just experience, but you get to a certain point where you want to be able to pass that off and help other people. And you've acquired this knowledge, and you might have these weird skills, whatever they may be. And it's like, I want to pass this off to my brothers. I want to be able to help people. And yeah, it seems like with age, that's what it comes down to. If you don't mind, talk about the 6-week lead up while you were in Nepal, and what that experience was like. I mean, from what I understand, there's a big acclimation process of going up from camp to camp, and up and down, maybe even. I don't know exactly, but just explain that if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure. So really the climatization process starts with your trek to Everest Base Camp. You fly into Lukla, that's roughly 9,000 feet. And then you have about a 8 to 10 day trek just getting up to base camp. It sits at 17,500 feet. Work your way up to base camp, take some recovery days, because even there, at base camp, you're still over 17,000 feet. So you see, a lot of people have hard times with headaches or poor sleep, they lose appetite. So it takes them a few days just to acclimatize, to that elevation. And that's anywhere from, I don't know, I think once everyone else got there, it was 3 to 5 days. And then we did a couple, hikes around base camp, just getting up to, 18, 19,000 feet, coming back down, and you're just slowly adapting and letting your body process and recover until your first rotation up the mountain.
Was there any struggles there for you getting up to 18,000 feet? Was that difficult at all?
No,
really?
There wasn't. And I obviously with my attempt, attempting without supplemental oxygen, I looked at this climb and this expedition, I think probably a lot differently than a lot of other folks, just because it really is. Man, it's so big and it's so far out there, and it's so incredibly dangerous to make that attempt, especially on your first attempt ever on that mountain. So as soon as we started moving on the trail, like I said, from Lukla, the first day of the trek, I took every day and I use that as a training day. I was like, okay, this is my fitness for today. I had everything dialed out, planned out. And, I told myself early on, like, no matter what the outcome of this expedition is, I will leave no room for question on, could I have done more? Maybe I should have done this. It was my intent to put everything on the table every day and make the most of it. So, even during that trek to base camp, all of the different sections to different villages we're going to, I got after it. I had my pack on my back and I was moving. I was trying to gain fitness, forcing my body to adapt. And then, I got to base camp, and, I say we did 2 hikes. We actually went up to a Pomori, it's a neighboring mountain there at base camp. We went up to their advanced base camp, and it was 19,000 feet. I went on 2 hikes, and then the rest of the group, they kind of split in half. So one group was taking a rest day, the group would go, and then I went the second day with the other group. I felt good. My body was recovering, no issues with headaches, sleep, my appetite was up. I was forcing food and hydration. And I kind of looked at it as though, like, if I feel like I can move, if my body's feeling like it's recovering, then I'm going to move. I'm going to do what I can. If I hit a point to where I'm overtraining, or, I'm tired, I'm having different issues, or I do have effects of altitude, yeah, absolutely, stop it there and take a rest day, recover. But I just kind of looked at it. If I feel like I can move, I need to move. So we did that. And then we started our first rotation up the mountain, and the first rotation was a 10-day rotation. And we moved from base camp up through the Khumbu Icefall to Camp 1, which Camp 1 is right around 19,500 feet, maybe. So definitely good elevation gain, but with that, you are going through the Khumbu Icefall, right? So that section in itself is really the most dangerous and the most exposed section on that route. The day we went through, I got to Camp 1. Actually, Morgan, he was with me, and a couple other guys. We were in the first group, and there's a very vertical section after a big crevasse crossing with like 3 ladders attached to each other. And I think it was an hour or two after we came through, the ladder collapsed. A lady fell into the crevasse, and then another Sherpa fell into the crevasse and broke his back. So there was two separate helicopter rescues that happened basically right as we were arriving at Camp 1.
Wow.
And you see these things, they kind of happen nonstop, especially in like I said, the ice fall, because there's the danger and the risk of crevasses. You have serac falls, avalanches, the ropes and all the safety lines, everything's attached to the wall by ice screws, but the problem is, with a lot of warming and heating, those screws melt out and the anchors blow. So people will pull a line, blow that anchor, and then, fall off the mountain, fall into a crevasse. So we all worked up. That first day we got to Camp 1, and I think we had like 3 rest days at Camp 1. And those days felt good. So I just did easy day hikes up to day climbs, I guess, up to Camp 2. Just, again, getting some fitness. I felt good. And the way I kind of looked at it, the more time I can get my body up to higher altitude, the more red blood cells, the more I can adapt, and do that. So then we all moved up to Camp 2, and we were at Camp 2, which is at 21,500 feet. We were there, I think, on that first rotation for about 4 days. And the first day, we get there, and then the next day is just a recovery day, because now you're at high altitude.
Sure.
So definitely a rest day. And then again there, I did with a buddy, we did one climb up to about 22,500 feet, came down, and then I actually went, and then I ended up starting with a buddy, but he turned around early the next day all the way to Camp 3. So now it's at 23,500 feet. And I just kind of got up to Camp 3, tagged it, kind of took a breath, like, okay, how do I feel? Yep, all systems are go, feel good, no worries. Come back down to Camp 2. And then the next day I went up with another group, and we went to Camp 3 and actually spent the night there. Came down to Camp 2, and then after that we went all the way back down to base camp.
Wow.
And so this is the point where this was the main, all the rest of the climbers, were climbing with supplemental oxygen. So after this rotation, they all went down to lower villages. That was the end of their climatization process. So they went down to lower villages to really rest, recover, and wait for our summit window for our attempt. And there's one other climber in the group with me, Alex, and he was attempting without the use of supplemental oxygen as well. So him and I moved together a lot on the mountains, and especially after that first rotation, we were, climbing partners with everything we did. And I was really fortunate with the guide company I was with. We developed our own training plan, like our rotations, like the day climbs I was telling you about, the things I did. That was just simply like, hey, I want to go do this for this reason. Like, okay, yep, go ahead. And then so for our second rotation, we developed that. And I took 2 days off between our first and second rotation. And then Alex and we pushed back up on the mountain. And we ended up doing a straight push from base camp to camp 2. And I think maybe it's so context wise, like, base camp to camp 1, I think on average, it's probably between 8 and 10 or 12 hours. Camp 1 to camp 2 average is probably 2 to 4 hours. And then so on and so forth. And I can talk about that on up the mountain. So they're big movements, they're big days in the mountains. So we did a push from base camp to camp 2, and I was pretty amazed, like, just at how well the body does adapt, and the production of red blood cells, and letting your body recover. Because I do everything based off of heart rate, especially with running background, right? And I decided
even out there, you were using heart rate even out there, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. And I decided, I approached it the same way I do a longer distance ultra, a bigger ultra. And for me, 140, I'm 39 years old. So 140 beats a minute. I was like, I'm going to keep it low, moderate, and then I'm going to shut it down, to make sure I don't burn myself out or overtax myself. So that's what I did. And I was pretty impressed on the second rotation up. I still didn't break that 140 threshold, but I think we cut over an hour off of our time to camp 1. We pushed straight to camp 2 and cut about 45 minutes off of that time. And I was like, wow, like, we're really not working any harder. We're being smart. We're not pushing ourselves too much. But seeing the process work, that was a big confidence boost for me. So we get up to camp 2 that day. The thing that caught us off guard is how hot it was. So the Western Coombe is the section above the Khumbu icefall, and you're above 20,000 feet, and it's south facing. So it actually has the strongest source of sun and radiation off of the snow anywhere else in the world. And when I heard that, I was like, wait, really? And then I thought about it. I was like, oh yeah, no, that totally makes sense, because it is in this coombe, it's in this big valley. And so the sun is just reflecting off of everything coming off of the ground. And on that day, it was over 90 degrees.
Oh, wow.
So we start at 2:00 in the morning. It's, below zero and snowing. And then we hit 90 degrees. We're down to our base layers. And I carried on that movement 2 liters of water with me. And we both end up having some heat exhaustion by the time we arrived to camp 2. And it took me about 4 or 5 hours to get enough fluid, enough electrolytes, liquids back in me to kind of straighten my head back out and kind of feel normal and actually start recovering.
Wow.
So that was a huge lesson learned, that that's actually been the cause for some failed attempts without oxygen. It's just the heat in the Western Coombe for other climbers. And we were so fortunate to find that out on a rotation as opposed to our summit attempt.
Totally. Yeah. 2 liters of water doesn't seem like that's very much. Especially for a day like that. Why only 2 liters?
Water's heavy, dude.
Totally.
Water's heavy. And this is where, it is so critical with any of this stuff. You have to know your body. You have to have your nutrition, your hydration. dialed and know how to fuel, to recover, to keep moving, without overtaxing. But also when you're, anything in the mountains, but especially up there, you can't carry anything extra. You have to have everything dialed to only things that you need for whatever the section of that movement is, whether it be from camp to camp or your summit push. You want to move, kind of the ideal is like, fast and light, and as light as you can. So for me, I think on my last trip, I went from base camp to camp 2 in 5 hours. So I know myself well enough, for moving in the mountains and over a long distance, like, I don't need any more water than that. I time my water, every, during a race or an event, it's every 15 to 20 minutes, depending on what I'm doing. Up there, I drank water every 30 minutes, took in calories every hour. So I still had my watch. I still kept the process and everything dialed, and it worked out. It worked out quite well. I never carried more than 2 liters of water on me.
Okay.
And then I had, with those 2 liters, just like a race, I carry, I broke it up into like smaller 500 milliliter Nalgene's. So then each one has my electrolyte drink in it, and in different mixes. So you're always getting calories and electrolytes as well. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I mean, when I'm moving around in the mountains here in Colorado, like you said, you kind of get to know your own body. I know that if I'm going to climb this mountain, if I want to go fast and light, I don't need that much water, because I've done this mountain a handful of times or whatever. And yeah, you just kind of figure it out as you go. So talk about like the week before your summit and what that looked like. Are you just like waiting for days on end for a weather window, or what's that like? Or did you have like a certain day planned? Like, okay, this is the day we're going for it.
Yeah. So we knew early on that the first weather window was going to be around the 13th of May. We saw that coming in, and especially myself and Alex, we immediately knew we wanted to push to at least the second window. One, because especially attempting without O's, you cannot afford to stand around or get stuck in a line or in a big queue of people. And 2, between the 13th and, I summited on the 21st of May, the weather, not only was it a second window, but it was notably warmer. The temperatures warmed up, the winds died. Another, huge risk factor with that attempt is the risk of hypothermia and frostbite, just because you're so much more prone to it. Your body's so much more colder without that additional oxygen. So we knew we were immediately going to push to that second window, no question. And then it ended up, we had, I think 3 of our climbers, they actually summited around the 15th. But the rest of us, we all summited on the 21st, on that 21st window. So for me, we did that second rotation, and it was critical for me during my rotations to get up to 8,000 meters to 26,000 feet, into the death zone, because I had to find out if I could even get that high, if my body would adapt, if I could function. And, before I sit here and I say, yes, I'm going to attempt to summit without oxygen, I have to know that I can make it to 8,000 meters. So on the first rotation, I was actually going to attempt it the night I slept at camp 3. But we had snowfall the evening before and high winds, and the avalanche danger was, I thought it was quite high. We actually had an avalanche that night come down within 100 meters of our tent, and snow's hitting the walls, and it's just this incredibly loud big avalanche that went down the Lhotse face. And then when I woke up the next morning, checked the snow conditions. There's definitely a slab that had formed that I just wasn't comfortable with. So I decided that first rotation not to go to Camp 4, to come back down. So on the second rotation up with Alex, I knew I had to make Camp 4. And so after we pushed past Camp 2, we went straight to Camp 3, stayed the night. And that morning we woke up and there's a lot of weather coming in. This was early on. And there were multiple teams that were going for the summit that got pushed off of the mountain because it was extreme weather advisory, very high winds. So I decided to leave Camp 3. Alex and I left together. And then you naturally, you kind of find your own pace, and we split up a bit. But I told myself I would assess, the weather and the conditions in the mountain as I'm going up. And, if it's not smart, if it doesn't make sense, turn around and come down. But I knew I had to give it a good effort to get to that elevation, that altitude. So I ended up making it up to the South Col to Camp 4. And I'm passing teams and Sherpa and people coming down, telling me to get off the mountain, go down, high winds. It's like, well, I'm not going for the summit. I'm just trying to, I'm just going to Camp 4. And I did. Once I got up to the South Col, it was 60+ mph wind gusts, kind of takes you off your feet a little bit. And it was pretty real, but I knew I was only going to be there long enough to get to the altitude and then come right back down.
Okay.
And so I did that, go back down. I meet up with Alex lower on the mountain, and then we end up working our way back to base camp. And we built out our schedule because we had already known that we wanted to go for our summit attempt around the 20th, 21st. So we built out, after we finished that second rotation, we would have 5 or 6 days of just straight rest and recovery before we started that summit attempt. And we did.
And is that rest all the way down at base camp?
Yeah. So I went down, and again, we get to base camp. Everyone else was already gone. They're down lower. Alex, he decided that, he wanted to stay down in a lower village. So the next day he went down to a village that's around 14,000 feet. So much lower, and he could sleep on a bed and have warm food and recover. Or no, it's 13,000 feet. So he did that. I chose to stay at base camp because there's a lot of, you have all the climbers, the expeditions, but then you also have trekkers, and there's a lot of people that are sick. They're coughing, they're wheezing, they have, chest colds, stomach virus, all these things. And I was actually I don't know how, but the only person on our expedition that didn't get sick the whole time. So I was so adamant about not changing anything, not risking about, putting myself and exposing myself to other individuals and possibly getting sick. But then also there's a lot of water and foodborne illness that people get and experience, and diarrhea and different things. And I was like, I don't want to risk getting sick from somebody else. And I'm used to the food. I know the food. I have no issues with it. I'm comfortable at base camp. I'm just going to stay here. Okay. And so I decided to do that, and it worked out well because I got to, I'm in direct communication, each day with the owner of the expedition, lead guide, so we're constantly looking at weather, and we're planning and strategizing, getting ready, for the summit push. So I stayed at base camp, and I'm glad I did. It worked out pretty well.
Okay. And up till now, there's been no use of supplemental oxygen, right? And other people who are going up to Camp 3 and 4 are using oxygen. Is that right?
So up to this point within our expedition, there has been no use of supplemental oxygen other than emergency cases. So nobody's been climbing or training with it. We did have a climber on that first rotation when everyone was there at Camp 2. I ended up meeting up with him early in the morning because he was actually planning on descending, because he had been quite sick and just having a really hard time adapting to altitude, having a lot of acute mountain sickness issues and AMS issues, stuff like that. So I see him early in the morning, and he's just trying to put on his crampons on, getting ready to go off the mountain. And I'm watching him, and I could tell that he's off. I could tell talking to him, he's not normal. He's kind of slurring a little bit, kind of cloudy. And then he finally asked me, he's like, "Jason, will you help me put on my crampons?" I'm like, "What's up, man? What's wrong?" So he shows me, and it was very apparent that he was dealing with high altitude cerebral edema, swelling of the brain. And so at that point, I told him, like, "Hey, like, you're not going anywhere, you're staying here." And we got oxygen, medical oxygen for him, put him on supplemental oxygen, and monitored him for 24 hours. And then he was able to descend. But nobody climbing had used oxygen. When I was coming down for my second rotation, the other expedition teams on the mountain that were starting their summit push, they were on, supplemental oxygen, and most of them were all starting at Camp 2. They would start on supplemental oxygen, move up to Camp 3, sleep on oxygen there, and then obviously for the rest of the climb. Yeah.
Okay. One of the Instagram questions that came in before we started this was how many people out there did you see that were just like really inexperienced and maybe didn't even belong out there? Like, your experience was pretty vast, it sounds like. I mean, you've had a lot of time in the mountains, and you studied up on this thing. When I talked to Morgan, when I had him on the show, he had done several big mountains before Everest. So you guys had the experience, the knowledge, the know-how. Did you see people out there that you thought, good grief, they don't even belong out here?
Yeah, you definitely do. It's going to happen. It's a part of that mountain. You see the inexperience with technical improficiencies, people not knowing how to properly or safely rappel or attach into ropes, or how to put on and size crampons, how to move through and negotiate fixed lines and transitions. And definitely see, and when you see stuff like this happen, it's not like an immediate like frustration or like anger or judgment. It's like, I don't want to see you get hurt. Like, that scares me, because I don't want to see anybody get hurt, get injured, obviously get killed on that mountain. But then you also take into account, everybody has a Sherpa with them as well. Like, my climbing Sherpa was Lok Bagela's Sherpa, and we did everything together, and so every climber on that mountain has a Sherpa that's with them as well. And you see these, improficiencies or the lack of fitness, whatever it may be. And it's just like, it scares you, because you don't want to see anything happen to them. And you definitely don't want to see anything happen to the individual that it's their responsibility to keep them safe and get them up and down that mountain. Through my rotations, I ended up seeing same people multiple times, kind of going up or down the mountain, or, like I said, doing day hike, whatever. And I remember seeing individuals down low who were just clearly so out of it. Because I try to be, like, when I'm moving in the mountains or during events, in the same way on this expedition, I love talking to people. I love, greeting people. Hey, how you doing? Like, high stoke, positivity kind of thing. I enjoy interacting with people. And, you see somebody like, "Hey, good morning, how are you?" Or like, "Oh, it's such a beautiful day." And they don't respond, or they can't talk, they can't walk straight. And, there were multiple people I passed low on the mountain, like near Camp 1, who I kind of recommend, like, "Hey, maybe take a break. Do you have food? Do you have water? Here's some snacks. Maybe we, go down." And they're just like, "No, I'm going up. I'm going up. I'm going up." And you see this stuff, and you just like immediately in the back of your mind, like, gosh, I hope they come back down.
Dangerous.
You know,
Yeah. Right.
it's scary. And I knew this was something I was going to encounter, right? We've all seen the movies, documentaries, and we've all heard about this stuff. Um, and I didn't know how I was going to perceive it or handle it once I did come across it. You know, from my background, you know, training, you know, military experience, you know, soft guys, I can talk to them, and I do talk to them and direct them and train and instruct much different than I'm going to a random individual on the mountain, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And plus in that environment, like, you have to be very cautious. You know, if you see something that is a blatant unsafe act, or somebody doesn't know how to rappel, or somebody puts someone else at risk, when you're in that environment and in that situation, you have to be very mild-mannered, calm, very almost like supportive in a way, because the last thing you want to do is create any more stress to an already stressful and potentially dangerous environment, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And what I came to find out and kind of learn through this process is, even the individuals who just, me as Jason, if I were to look at them or watch how they were climbing or negotiating things, and like in my mind, maybe they're unsafe or they're unprepared, they're not qualified really to be here and be attempting this mountain. You know, so many people hire a personal Sherpa, and I didn't know quite what that was until I got there. And you know, obviously for the Sherpa, all of the Sherpa, you know, these are huge expeditions for them. They're, you know, it's their annual income. You know, you take an individual who their monthly average income is $100, and they're going to be making a few thousand over the course of 6 weeks. Like, that's substantial. And what I found out was the personal Sherpa, the people that hire personal Sherpa, they pay a lot of additional money that goes directly to that Sherpa. So the Sherpas that do that are the more experienced, the more seasoned, they're very technically proficient. You know, they've had multiple summits. You know, they know what they're doing. They know what to expect from their client. They know that they will be doing everything for them, and they do. So it's kind of a different world, man. Like, it's not, you know, it doesn't line up with, you know, what I do here, what I would expect out of any one of my students. But again, you know, that's how people make their living, and that's the mountain, and that's, you know, it is a business, and you know, luckily everyone on our expedition, you know, got up and got down safely, and you know, everybody came home. So yeah, it was a learning experience.
So what is the difference there between the Sherpa that you had and someone coming in and paying for a personal Sherpa? What exactly are they doing for that client that costs extra?
Oh, man, everything. They're helping pack all of their gear, carrying any extra gear they may have, sleeping bag, extra coats, boots. They're working with them one-on-one on training for the technical skills, you know, helping size crampons. If they need extra gear kit, they'll actually purchase it over the phone from Namche Bazaar. That's at 11,300 feet. And like, there were multiple helicopters flying in and out of base camp, bringing a sleeping bag or a heavy puffy coat or boots or crampons, you know. And then, you know, even to the point literally of doing everything on the mountain and on the rope for that client. So, you know, when you're moving on a fixed line, or you're climbing, you know, you have your Jumar, your ascender, you have another locking carabiner that's attached to the rope as a safety attachment. And these Sherpa, they're clipping all of that for their clients.
Oh, wow.
They're reclipping. You know, if a client goes on to rappel, they're clipping them into rappel, putting them onto rappel. They get down the rappel, unclipping that. And so literally everything for them.
Wow.
Yeah. And it, like I said, I definitely had a hard time with seeing some of the things I did, but it's not my place to judge, or to say what's right or what's not. It's just my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, you definitely see things, because again, and for me, everything went back to safety. I don't want to see anyone get hurt. I want to see everybody come off that mountain. And the thought that always runs through my mind is being self-sufficient. Like, what would you do if that person wasn't there? Could you clip into the rope yourself? Could you safely ascend or descend or rappel? And for me, and this is just Jason's personal opinion, but if you can't do that, then I don't know, maybe seek some training and preparation before you go and tackle that thing.
Yeah. So it sounds like there are people who have summited Mount Everest that don't really have a mountaineering background or a ton of experience. Like, say I'm a millionaire and I want to summit Everest. If I have enough money to pay the right people, that can be done.
Yeah, it can be done. And with that too, like right now, like we're talking more like technical proficiency, mountaineering stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but still, like, if you have the body and the physiology and the fitness and the physical capability to move yourself up that mountain and safely get back down, then yeah, it can be done. But unfortunately, I saw a former professional sponsored triathlete, incredible resume, and that was the same individual who had Haste at Camp 2, and unfortunately he didn't summit. He ended up getting turned around because of extreme exhaustion, and we ended up having to do a rescue on him.
That had to have been humbling.
Well, and I don't know, right? Each individual takes those circumstances differently. But one thing, for me, out of our group of say 15 who are attempting this climb, such a wide range of backgrounds and capabilities and things we've done, from other professional athletes that were there with us to CrossFitters, ultra runner, whatever. And there is no, man, like, I think you'd be hard pressed. Like, I don't think there's any way to actually find out how your body and how you're going to react at extreme high altitude before you get there. You don't know until you're there, until you're in that process. You're actually moving up the mountain, you're putting in physical work, and you get to those altitudes. You cannot like look across the table at somebody and be like, yep, you're going to make it. You're not, you can't do that. And that was a super eye-opening experience and a great learning experience, just to see how, my perhaps initial assumptions, early on in the expedition, to then see how people have performed and how their bodies adapted and how well they did, or how their bodies didn't adapt and they had a much harder time. Yeah,
for sure.
Super interesting.
One of the other Instagram questions that came in is like, if you don't mind, shine a spotlight on the Sherpas. I mean, I'm sure you saw some incredible Sherpa out there that are probably, for lack of a better word, just badasses, right? I mean, athletic in their own right, have made plenty of summits. I don't know if it was the Sherpa that you worked with or someone else that you saw out there, but shine a spotlight on them and like what they do on a daily or yearly basis. What does that look like?
Dude, that's such a great question. Whoever asked that, like, thank you very much. Bro, they're incredible. There is nothing that would happen on that mountain if it weren't for the Sherpa. I mean, starting from the beginning, the Kumbo Icefall, the only reason that route is possible is because they have the icefall doctors that are hired by the government that go through and put up all of the fixed lines and build the ladders and build that route through the Kumbo Icefall. And that route gets destroyed multiple times. It gets destroyed by climbers. It gets destroyed by avalanches. they're going through that ice fall multiple times a day, checking the route, rebuilding the route, refixing the ropes, rebuilding the ladders. The Sherpa that we were with in our expedition, dude, they are, I don't even know how to, like, physical, absolute beast. Like, we're carrying, I carried, for all intents and purposes, my own stuff. I was with an expedition, so they had the tents, everything was set up and established, but like all of my gear, my clothing, my extra food, all of my food above Camp 2, I carried all of my stuff. Well, my pack weighed, a whopping 32 to I think 44 pounds at the heaviest. And our Sherpa are carrying 6 to 8 oxygen bottles. They're carrying tents. They're carrying all of our food and supplies. They're carrying loads that weigh between 60 and 80 pounds this entire route, going in rotations, right? And they're doing it faster than the typical climber can climb the route with nothing on their back by unbelievable amounts of times. Like, I'm talking hours, and they do this stuff, and you're just like so amazed by their capability. And then they're so nice. They're so humble. They're so positive. They're so happy. They are absolutely, they will do, and they do anything for their clients, for their members, for each other, for anyone on that mountain. Like, it was that culture was one of the big reasons I really fell in love with Nepal and the Himalaya when Michelle and I did the base camp trek in 2018. And just some of the best people I've ever met in my life. And then now to be able to do this climb with them. And my climbing Sherpa, like I said, Lakba Gelu, he's 45 years old, and this dude could absolutely keep up with me in anything I was doing. Obviously on my summit day, he was well ahead of me going up, but he's moving at my pace with 60 pounds on his back. This was his 19th summit of Everest.
Wow.
And one night we were having dinner at Camp 2, and we're sitting next to each other. We're talking, and I look at his left hand, and he's missing half of his pinky and then half of his left ring finger, and I'm missing part of my left ring finger. I'm like, oh, hey, I kind of make a joke, hold up my hand, like, oh, we're both missing fingers. Well, the difference is I lost my finger in a silly weightlifting accident. Lakba Gelu lost his fingers to frostbite on his first expedition because he was changing an oxygen canister on the summit for a client.
For someone else.
And he lost, exactly. And I can't say enough, man. Like, they put it out there, and like I said, there's nothing that would happen on that mountain if it weren't for the Sherpa.
Wow. What is the most summits you heard of a Sherpa doing in a lifetime? Is there a number you can put on that? I mean, just summiting Everest once is an incredible accomplishment, but I'm just picturing these Sherpas. You said yours had done it 19 times. What is there a record?
There is, and honestly, I want to say it's mid-20s,
Wow.
maybe mid to high 20s now. Yeah, it's unbelievable. And
Incredible.
now, like, this is their job. So some of the Sherpa, live there either in the Khumbu or in Kathmandu. That may be their one big job for the season, but a lot of them, right after this expedition, they're going to other mountains, and they're constantly getting after. They're doing multiple expeditions a year, and it is, after seeing this, it's the danger that they put themselves in to do that job year after year, multiple times a year, being away from their families. It's pretty remarkable. Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, man. Day of, I think we're to that point in the story. When you woke up, The day of the summit, I'm guessing it was really, really early in the morning, midnight, 2 in the morning, I'm guessing. Did you know that that was going to be your day? Was there doubt in your mind? How did it all shake out?
Ugh, all right. Yeah. So, um, summit day for me, excuse me. Like I said, we generally moved up the mountain as our group, right? An expedition. But with everyone else that was on oxygen, they moved up a day ahead of us. And then so they went from camp 2, stayed a night at camp 3, and then went all the way to camp 4. And then they stayed an entire rest day at camp 4, on, supplemental oxygen. They started on oxygen. Most of them started at camp 2. Some of them started at camp 3, but they were on oxygen throughout this entire time. So from my attempt, I knew that I had to get to camp 4 and allow myself enough time to recover and try to eat and hydrate before my summit push. But I couldn't spend too much time there, because you really are, like, it's the death zone for a purpose. You can't spend any additional time there. So for everyone else, they had a full rest day at camp 4. For my summit push, I actually started at camp 3, and I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and started moving. I think about 4:35. I wake up early anyway, and so woke up early, pushed up, started at 5, got to camp 4 at 10 o'clock that morning. Linked up with all the other dudes, like, hey man, how you doing? See everybody again. And then I ended up spending 8 hours at camp 4, just throughout that day, just resting, eating. One big concern of mine, obviously you're very well aware, is fueling, right? You have to fuel for recovery, but especially before a big push. And I've always read about and heard, the body doesn't process food at that elevation. So a lot of people can't eat. Maybe they're eating, gummy worms or, gels and goos, things like that, things that are very easy to process, more simple carb, sugar type of stuff. But for me, I noticed up to that point, like when I was at camp 3, I was able to eat dehydrated meals, normal food, fine, no problem. So when I got to camp 4, I was very happy, because I was able to, as soon as I got there, I crushed a full, 900 calorie meal.
Nice.
I had a Snickers bar, I had some trail mix. I just started pounding water, getting electrolytes, and just really kind of trying to load up and fuel as much as I could. The only thing I couldn't do, I couldn't sleep while I was there. It was high winds. All that day was 40 to 60 mile an hour winds, just whipping across the South Col. But I was in my head too. At this point, I mentioned my climbing partner, Alex. He was going to attempt without oxygen as well. But on our summit push, he had been dealing with the stomach bug. So he wasn't feeling 100%. And he ended up making the decision when we got to camp 4 to go on supplemental oxygen for his attempt. So now we were going to get separated, and so that kind of, that plays into your mind a little bit, because he has summited multiple 8,000 meter peaks before. He's a very, very proficient climber, very experienced mountaineer. And he has experience at extreme high altitude. So, oh man, you kind of lose your climbing partner, and it's like, okay. It took, for those 8 hours in my tent was really just me getting recentered and refocused, and like, yep, okay, this happened, but I still have to do my thing. And for me anyway, I didn't fully comprehend or appreciate how dangerous it was, how risky it was, until I got there and went through that experience for myself. I mentioned like the risk for hypothermia and for frostbite, especially. Making sure I had my gloves dialed. I bought battery heated socks for my feet to make sure, try to avoid frostbite, and to do all of these things to prepare that. And then, the unknown of, at 6:30 that evening, I'm going to step out and I'm going to try to work up in, to this extreme high altitude. And I have no idea, but, my body will adapt or allow me to do it. But I ended up, just like going to that place in your mind where you just kind of have to block out the noise and get very, very focused and very dedicated to where, like, yep, I don't know how this is going to end up. I'm going to get in a bar fight, but I'm about to go get after it. And I kind of left in that mindset, like, yeah, it's going to get pretty real. And so at 6:30 p.m., I left Camp 4 with Lakba, and we started our attempt. And for the first 2 hours, it was quite windy still. But we knew that later on in the night, the winds were going to die down. And then the next day in the morning was calling for low winds. And that was our biggest concern. That was why we chose this weather window. It's trying to find, as little wind as possible. So we start to climb up, and the first big climb out of the South Col, you're climbing for about 1,800 feet, probably 50-degree slope. We had fresh snow, so none of it was consolidated. So every step you take, you slide down, 6 or 8 inches. And so it really, it was work, and it was a grind. And I could definitely notice, I noticed with me, as I increased altitude, the lack of oxygen affected me about every 1,000 meters. So about every, say, 3,000 to 3,500 feet. And I noticed that once I got above, because once I got to Camp 4 at 8,000, I really didn't feel anything different from what I had felt below that. But once I got to about 8,200 meters, it's like, okay, yeah, that was a shift. Like, definitely feeling the lack of oxygen here. And I had to be very diligent with my pacing and my breathing, my recovery. So I ended up getting into the system to where basically it was a pull on the rope, 2 steps, and then I would take 2 breaths for recovery. So, it was like 4 or 5 breaths for every 2 steps. And I ended up getting into the system, into this process, and it was efficient, and it kept me moving, and it wasn't taxing me too much. I felt fine. And I was actually moving at a pretty decent pace relative, right, for that altitude. And I just did that for hours, hundreds and hundreds of times. We got to the top of the balcony. So now probably at about 27,800, somewhere around there. I take a break. I take some gels, have some goos, drink some water, and then start working up. You do a ridge traverse, and then the last real bit of climbing is to the south summit. And by this time, at the base of the south summit, I had been moving for about 8 hours, 9 hours. And I get to the base of the south summit, and I look back across the ridge traverse, and I see the line of headlamps, people coming up, most of which were the rest of our team members. They had started a couple hours after me, and so now they were catching up to me. They caught up to me. And in my mind, the first thing I think about is like, shoot, like, I'm not going to be that guy to hold everybody else up. I'm not going to create a line. I'm not going to create a queue. Plus, just with our backgrounds, you see people coming up and catching you, like, shoot, like, I'm losing my pace. I'm slowing down. They're faster than me. They're more fit than I am. And so, like, I start getting a bit stressed out. And I think another part that kind of played into that as well, Lakba, he was always ahead of me. So throughout the night, I'm just constantly seeing his headlamp, a couple hundred meters ahead of me. So in my mind, I'm constantly like, shit, I'm too slow. I can't keep up with him. I'm moving too slow. And in that, obviously, he's on supplemental oxygen.
He is,
but
okay.
It's just one of the, he is, yeah.
That's
and he's been on, yep. And he was on oxygen from Camp 3.
Okay.
And, but it's, you know, the way the mind, it plays with you. You never want to be that individual to hold somebody else back. And so anyway, go up and get to the South Summit. Team comes up, they catch up with me, and I get up to this vertical rock band. It's like a vertical cliff section. And as you go up the South Ridge, you know, you go through 4 of these vertical rock bands. Well, they had already caught up with me. And now there's a, you know, 30 to 40 foot section of near vertical rock. I know I will hold them up. So I let, you know, the first, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 go ahead of me, because I don't want to hold them up. I don't want to cause a queue. And as soon as I let them pass, the first climber gets to that vertical rock section and can't figure out how to climb it. And it's stuck there, can't negotiate it. So I ended up just standing there, you know, for close to 20 minutes waiting now.
Wow.
And, you know, in my mind, as soon as that happened, I was like, shit, I immediately regret this decision. You know, I should have just been selfish. I should have just stayed doing what I was doing and focused on me, because I'm the only climber there attempting without, you know, supplemental oxygen. And so I'm at the highest risk right now. But so finally they get through and we start moving, and I'm kind of in the middle of the line of, you know, 15 to 20 climbers now. And they're all moving at, you know, somewhat similar pace. So again, I'm not going to hold them up and slow them down. So I end up pushing myself too hard, and I outpaced myself through this vertical section of the rock band. And when I get to the top of it, I start hyperventilating. I can't get oxygen. I can't breathe. I start getting dizzy. I'm still on my feet, but it takes me, you know, probably 5, maybe 10 minutes to recover and to get everything back, heart rate low, oxygen, breathing again. It's like, okay, cool. You know, that was a hard effort. I know it was too hard of an effort, but I can recover.
Okay. So I want to stop you right there. I want to understand. So you were climbing up, and were you still paying attention to your heart rate and trying to keep it under 140 up until that point?
Good question. And no, I ended up, I realized that after I got above, really like Camp 3 and above, heart rate was kind of out the window, because everything is oxygen dependent now. You know, everything revolves around pacing and breathing and just trying to find air. So heart rate, I was actually surprised for the most part at extreme high altitude. My heart rate was very low, but I'm breathing very, very hard, trying to find oxygen. Yeah. Okay. So I ended up deciding on my summit push, I just, you know, I had my baseline established. It was kind of there. And then I didn't take my heart rate monitor on the summit push. It was all based off of respiratory rate.
Got it. Okay. And then you pushed yourself a little bit too hard up that vertical part, and then you were just hyperventilating once you got to the top of that. Okay. Okay.
Yep.
And what happened from there?
Yeah. So recovered from that first one, and I did the same thing through the second and the third rock bands. I was able to recover, you know, thinking like, okay, yep, it's hard, but I kind of have it dialed. And now I get to the last vertical band, and I was about 28,500 feet. I had no idea how close I was to the actual South Summit. I get through the last cliff band and start hyperventilating again, and then the lights go out. I pass out.
Damn.
And when I open my eyes and I come to, you know, my face is in the snow, I'm on the ground, and I had lost complete control and function of my bowels. I was, you know, my body was shut down. It was releasing. I was shitting and pissing myself, and I couldn't stop it. I couldn't control it. And, you know, this has never happened. Well, that's definitely never happened to me before, but you know, I've been in other situations where, you know, little high risk, kind of putting myself out there. I've been unconscious before. But this time, for whatever reason, as soon as I came to, the first thought that crossed my mind was Michelle. And it was nothing like big, blown up. This happens in milliseconds, so quick. But the first thought that crossed my mind was Michelle. And that immediately told me I have to get home. And that made the decision very, very easy for me to go on supplemental oxygen at that point, because I had always told myself, from the beginning, I knew I was going to have to push my body very close to the limit. I knew I was going to have to put myself out there, but I will make sound decisions in the mountains. And at the end of the day, summit or not, like, I will come home. That's the goal, is to, hopefully summit. The priority is to come home. And so in that moment, when I realized like that I had lost control, my body had shut down, and it was time to go on supplemental oxygen. So go ahead.
So, I mean, your body probably thought that you were dying, right? Am I understanding that right? Like, I mean, you're pissing and shitting yourself. You blacked out. How long were you unconscious for? And yet, I mean, your body thought you were dying.
Yeah, and I'm sure it was pretty quick, right? Probably seconds.
Okay.
But it was a quite extreme case of high altitude cerebral edema.
Yeah.
My brain shut down, and it was trying to survive it at that point. Yeah.
And I mean, I guess I've had near-death experiences, and I'm guessing that you probably have in your line of work too. And like, when you come back and wake up, you immediately think of your family and your loved ones and what's going to happen to them without me. And you sort of go into this survival mode of, okay, I have to survive this right now. It's like your survival mentality goes to the next level there, for lack of a better way to describe it. But so that was the point that you decided to go on to oxygen. And I'm guessing your Sherpa was carrying extra oxygen for you, or how does that work?
Yep. So Lakvigelu, he carried one emergency bottle for me. That was an extra 8 pounds he was carrying just for me, on his back. But when it happened, he was just a few steps above me and to my left. So as soon as I made that decision, I just looked at him. I was like, Lakva, I need to go on oxygen. He was like, okay. So we got my canister, regulator, mask, everything set up, put in my pack, went on oxygen. And a lot of times you just kind of hear like, oh, going on supplemental oxygen, but you don't really understand what that means or how that relates, because the oxygen canisters, they have regulators on them. So you can control the airflow and the amount of oxygen that is breathed through the mask. And just for reference, while people were sleeping, they would sleep on 1 to 2 liters of oxygen. And then while they're moving and climbing, I think the average is probably around 4 liters of oxygen per minute. And I heard of climbers going up to 8 to 12 liters of oxygen per minute, just incredible amounts.
Wow.
I only had, like I said, I had the 1 emergency bottle of oxygen, and at 2 liters per minute, that canister will last for around 8 hours. So I went on 3 liters a minute because I needed some oxygen. I absolutely needed to recover, but I also knew I had to be smart and to make sure I had enough oxygen to get me back down to Camp 4 because I'm still above 8,000 meters.
Sure.
So I went on 3 liters per minute there. And even once I started my oxygen, I was probably there for about 10 to 15 minutes, trying to recover, kind of get my head back, my balance, equilibrium, all of these things, to safely move and to start climbing. And like I mentioned before, I've never been one of those individuals that has like summit fever and no matter what, I'm going to do this, especially with my job and the way we try to teach our students. That was never a thing for me. So Lockbow was there with me, and then our lead guide, David, he was behind me. And David and I, he's very experienced mountain guide. This was his sixth summit of Everest. You know, he's been on that mountain, I think 8 or 9 times, very experienced and very, very good at what he does. And I told him, I was like, hey, and I'll just be frank with you. I was like, hey man, I don't give a shit about the summit. You watch me. If my foot placements are off, if my rope work is off, if I look fucked up at all, you tell me, I'll turn around and go down. He's like, okay. And he stayed behind me, you know, as we went up from there. And, you know, after we started climbing, we climbed for about another, I don't know, 15 minutes, and we're on top of the South Summit. And then I look across the summit ridge, and there's the proper summit. So I had no idea, you know, really how high I was at that point. But there's crossing the summit ridge. It's a quite technical section, especially now. There's a lot of rock with sheer drop-offs, you know, 11,000 feet either side, quite technical. So the easy bit of climbing wasn't over, you know, or the hard bit of climbing wasn't over by any means. But we worked through, and then we ended up getting to the summit at 6:30 in the morning. So right at 12 hours from Camp 4.
Okay. And I guess I want to ask, and this is a crude question that may not have mattered at all. You pissed and shit yourself. You're wearing the big down suit. Like, what is that like, standing on Mount Everest, having soiled yourself? Is that even a thought in your mind at that point? Or forgive me, I've never been up above 14,000 feet. What was that like?
No, it's a really good, man. And honestly, it's something I've been dealing with and trying to process since I've been home. Honestly, you know, when I was on the summit, the only thing that was running through my head was that I'd failed. I had failed my attempt. I had put in that much work, that much dedication, and I had come, you know, relatively so close, 500 vertical feet from achieving this goal of mine. And then, yeah, I'm on the summit. I have shit down the back of my down suit. I just failed my attempt. Like, I think I had, you know, 1 or 2 pictures taken of me, and that was it. I was ready to go in, you know, 5 or 10 minutes. I'm like, all right, now I have to get back down. You know, I knew how much was below me, and I was just focused on, you know, getting off the mountain safely and kind of getting back down. But it definitely wasn't a super high stoke or glorious kind of summit. Yay. I was just like, nope. I'm like, yeah, I'm here, but I'm ready to go down.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess that's probably somewhat common too, because most of the accidents that happen in the big mountain world are usually on the descent, and just climbing some of the more technical 14,000 foot peaks here in Colorado. I'll get to the top and I'm freaking nervous. I'm like, okay, I'm only halfway there. You know, I still have to down climb this thing or somehow get down. So, I understand almost being in a hurry, and it's like, the journey's not over. The journey's only halfway done at this point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, just again, kind of some context there with that. You know, I started that morning, 3:00 in the morning from Camp 3, got up to Camp 4 at 10, and I left at 6:30. So what are you looking at? 15 and a half hours there. And then it was 12 hours to the summit. That day didn't end for me until I got all the way back down to Camp 2, and it turned into a 40-hour day.
Whoa.
You know, and a lot of people, you know, because people are understanding, and they say that quite often. They understand the statistics, like, yeah, most accidents happen coming down. You're only halfway there. You know, I would argue the summit isn't halfway. You know, like, things happen coming down, you know, especially there on that climb, because most of the climbers start at Camp 4, but to get to a safe place to sleep and recover and like a decent amount of oxygen, they have to move past Camp 4, past Camp 3, all the way back down to Camp 2. And
why do you have to go back down to camp 2? Why can't, like, is camp 3 still considered a dangerous spot to stop and rest?
camp 3 is doable. Camp 3, you can sleep, and you can sleep without oxygen if you've acclimatized and you have the physiology to do it, but you're not gonna recover. And because of the risk to cold weather injuries on that summit push, hypothermia, frostbite, extreme exhaustion, camp 3 is still, it's very exposed. It's on the middle of the Lhotse face, with 5,000 feet of exposure below you on a 50 to 60 degree snow slope that avalanches and has been the site of multiple deaths, coming down the Lhotse face. It's not a place you really want to stay at if you don't have to. So the goal is to get down to camp 2. And then, and actually, I would even argue you probably, because all of the climbers are on supplemental oxygen, they wouldn't be able to sleep at camp 3 without oxygen, because their body has now lost that adaptation process. It's used to the oxygen. So if you pull that away, you're going to create a very high risk for altitude injury.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a big day, and we, that's where, we did have incidents was on the descent. So when I came down, I got back down to camp 4, and weather was now rolling in, high winds, it was snowing, it was a whiteout, and it was just, you had to get off of the mountain, and I had run out of oxygen. So I get down to camp 4, and I'm feeling fine. And this is where, it's a learning experience for me, but I made a poor decision, because we had to move so quickly from camp 4 to get down the mountain. I didn't use supplemental oxygen. And in my mind, one, weather, we had to move, but also in my mind, I knew that I had been to camp 4 multiple times. I had just sat here for 8 hours. I was totally fine. All of these things. What I did not think about was I had just spent 8 hours on supplemental oxygen. So again, that adaptation, the, increase in red blood cells, everything I gained from my rotations, I lost a good bit of it by using supplemental oxygen. And I didn't notice it until I started moving down from camp 4. And I noticed my equilibrium was a bit off. My balance was off. I was having to focus and be very, very diligent with every foot plate, with everything I was doing. And, as soon as I recognized that in like the first probably 15 minutes of the descent, I was like, yeah, I just fucked up. I have to move slow. I cannot fuck this up. I have to be very, very diligent with everything I do to get off this mountain. And it just took it slow, and was obviously able to come down. And then sure enough, for me, once I got back down to around, or just above camp 3, so 24,000 feet, it was a game changer for me. My head opened up, cleared up. I felt much better. I was able to make decisions. I was very tired. I was pretty worked for sure. But that was the first, like, okay, cool. My body's going back to normal now. So we get down to 3, we get back down to camp 2 after 7:30 that night. And then we find out one of the climbers who had gotten turned around because he was moving too slow, ended up basically just falling into his tent at camp 4 and was too exhausted, and he couldn't move. He wouldn't leave the tent. So now himself, David, lead guide, and 2 Sherpa had to spend a unplanned additional night at camp 4 to really rescue and take care of this climber. And I mentioned the weather was coming in. That night it shredded tents. It ripped tents off of the South Col, threw them into Tibet, David, he was holding the walls of their tent so it wouldn't blow away, so it wouldn't get ripped and shredded. And he really saved that climber that night. And another climber made it off of the mountain, off the summit, but he had gotten frostbite on 3 of his fingers. So he ended up staying at camp 3 because he was quite exhausted as well. So I ended up, when I got to camp 2, the plan is get to camp 2, sleep, recover, and then you go straight down to base camp, get off the mountain. And I ended up staying an extra day at camp 2 until we got both of them, everybody down to us. We started treating for frostbite, hands and feet. Then the other climber, extreme exhaustion, doing everything we could with him on oxygen, getting, nutrients and liquids into him. And then we ended up doing a helicopter rescue for him that following day. And then I went down with the other climbers.
Okay. I realize that you're, or at least I'm guessing, you're like a type A personality. Like you set a goal and you get it done. Talk to me about the goal of no oxygen and then using the supplemental oxygen and the feeling of, I understand your feeling of failure, like you didn't do the thing you set out to do, but yet there's still pictures of you on top of the summit. To us who don't really understand it, it's like, dude, no, you did it. I don't quite get it. When I talked to you on the phone a couple of weeks ago, the only thing I could think in my mind is I was just like likening it to someone going out and trying to set a course record at Hard Rock or Leadville or something. And I'm going to be the fastest to ever do this. And they don't set the fastest known time, but they still win the race. It's like, dude, you still did it, man. So like, how have you reckoned with that in your head over the last few weeks? Or is that something you have been able to come to terms with? Do you still feel like it's a failure, or like, how are you doing with that?
Yeah, it's been a challenge for sure. And yeah, definitely for the first, especially 3 weeks being home, anytime I have dreams about it, you can't really get it out of your head. It's pretty prominent thing in your mind, just that the whole experience, right? Like, and I think about it, just that, I failed because I set a personal goal for myself, and, I had it in my mind, and I put it out there like, yeah, I'm going to do this thing. And I came up short. And, so it's definitely been a challenge and difficult to kind of deal with it. And you are right. Yeah, I am a very type A individual. I know, Michelle, she'll talk about that at length if you let her. But I think I put a lot of I'm pretty hard. I'm hard on myself. Like no one will ever be as hard on me as I am on me. And I set goals for myself, and and I'll work and I'll do everything in my power to achieve those goals. Because if just the way I was raised, if you say you're going to do something, you do it. And I've tried to kind of hold myself to that. What I only started, and again, because it doesn't make sense, right? And I talked to Michelle, family, friends, everybody I talked to. It's like, dude, you summited, like huge, right? Like, okay, success. And so I, especially having conversations with Michelle, and I told her, I was like, I don't understand. I don't know why, like in my mind, I can't, view that, as a success, I guess. And it's just that very simple, I said I was going to do something and didn't do it. But then like you step back and look at the big picture of this entire expedition and the amount of time and days I put on that mountain and the things that we did. And then to the last 500 feet, have this happen. I think one thing that made it hard was that I'm quite confident because of the way I was feeling, that if I would have controlled my my stress and my mind a little better and stayed more to focusing on my climbing and my pacing, what I needed to do, I wasn't having any issues at that point. And I, I pretty confident that I could have kept going, had I not messed that up. So that's been heavy on me, because I can go back and look at like, yeah, I made this mistake and there's consequences, and that's what happened. But what I'm trying to kind of process now, and I was thinking about this earlier today, just, obviously knowing we're going to have this conversation, like I've failed at a lot of things. And in the immediate, it's a failure. You go into depression, you get hard on yourself, and it's like the biggest thing. But then as time goes on, you start realizing how big the entire process was. And then you start learning from it, you start taking from it, you start, kind of adapting and improving yourself for future endeavors. Moab was a great example. That first year, that DNF, that hit me really hard. And I came into that second year in a totally different place, and was able to get it done. So I was kind of thinking of this event along those lines today. And it's like, yeah, I went up, I got punched right in the face, but I was still able to pull things together. Yeah, I went on supplemental oxygen, but I was able to be safe, still made, good decisions, and was able to safely get up and get back down the mountain and, do the best I could to try to help others as well.
Right.
Not everything goes perfect or as planned. And, I just did what I had to do and still got there. So I think I maybe just need a little bit more time to really, continue to process this event. But yeah, it's a learning experience for sure.
Yeah. I mean, from my point of view, it's like, yeah, you still did it, man. And it's like, yeah, I climbed Everest, but I had to put gloves on at the top because it was really cold up there. It's almost like it just seems so arbitrary, but I understand it's a bigger deal to you. And I'm just wondering, like, with your type A personality, are you thinking I have to go back and do this again? Or or have you crossed that bridge yet? Or what are you thinking?
No,
I mean, if you say no, it's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah,
I mean, geez, you went and did the thing.
Yeah. And I've learned, I've learned well enough now, like never say never, but
sure,
because this being what it is, and it's so big and there's so much that goes into it. Not to mention, what I put Michelle and my family through, while I was gone during this trip. I don't know if I would go back, and I definitely could not justify, paying to go back again.
Right.
But more importantly than that, one, like, I think it probably came pretty close on this trip, and, like having Michelle here and, supporting me and my family supporting me and always being there for me. Like, you do enough things and we're constantly chasing the next thing. And I see this a lot. Me and my buddies talk about this a lot. The military, especially in our line of work, always chasing the next thing and trying to always, do something better, get to the next level or the next deployment. You're chasing that dragon. Eventually you're going to find it. And, as I've gotten older and really, I hope I've gotten better, but like appreciating my family and loved ones, and realizing how, really selfish it is doing what I do. I don't think it's worth putting them through that. And then I've never been a check the block kind of a guy, just to go do something and just say, oh, yep, I did it. Like, I don't know. I'm not big on like accolades and posting things and stuff like that. And for me to go back, and the thought of taking all of that risk again, and, not just with extreme high altitude, but the weather, like I said, I had a very close call with an avalanche. I had a close call with Sirac Falls, had a close call on a snow bridge in a crevasse. There were multiple times through this expedition to where it was a very real possibility of getting hurt or worse. And you spend so much time on that mountain, like, is it really worth it? You know?
Yeah.
And I don't know if it would be. And if anything ever came up to where that possibility may come around, before I did anything, I would have to have a conversation with Michelle. And if she said no, or she wasn't comfortable with it, and it's like, nope, that's it.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Well, I'm glad you answered that way. And like, now I know that you're at least halfway human. So good, man. Good. How has reintegration back into society been? Coming back home, you were up in the mountain for 6 weeks. I'm guessing you were gone for a couple months, like back to family and friends, back to work. Has it been, how has it been? I'm just picturing coming back from a race and I did the thing and now I'm depressed because the thing is over with and I don't have anything to look forward to. Like, what's it been like for you?
yeah, no, coming home, obviously, seeing family, friends, all my buddies at work, it's great. I am really happy and really appreciate the fact that I, came back home. And so that's also given me different perspective, as well. Just, how much you appreciate, family, loved ones, friends. And, but, when I got back home, I was like, yeah, I feel a little tired, but like not too bad, a little bit of headache, maybe a little like jet lag or something. But I really kind of thought, I was like, man, fine. And it wasn't until I actually got back to the house, and I think it was the first time I was actually able just to turn my brain off and totally decompress and attempt to relax. And my body shut down for like 2 days. I was done. I wasn't going anywhere, just exhausted, sleeping. And I ended up, for the first 3 weeks being home, having really bad headaches. And, I've had concussions and stuff before. And so you have some, headaches, maybe a little vertigo or stuff after. But then, it's like after a day or so, it kind of goes away. But I was having really bad headaches and kind of got to the point to where I couldn't drive. I had vertigo. I was losing my balance. Literally couldn't get off the couch. And I think it went on about 3 days where it was pretty bad. And I was incapacitated, couldn't go into work, nothing. And, finally Michelle, she's so incredible. She called me out. We're having dinner one night. She looks at me, she's like, hey, you're fucked up. Like my speech was off. My memory recall was off. Like she could just tell like something is wrong with you. Yeah. And she ended up taking me into the ER the next day and did a CT scan. And I didn't have a stroke, so that's cool. Everything was fine there, but I had some brain swelling from my cerebral edema from that exposure. And there's really not much can do other than, they prescribed me with, like different medications, stuff for headaches and, acetaminophen, take Tylenol, all that kind of thing. But really, and they actually in the ER and the docs I've seen since, they apologized to me because they're like, hey, we're really sorry, man, but we don't see this. Like we've never dealt with, extreme high altitude,
Right.
kind of what's going on. And really the only thing I could get was just relax and, recover as much as you can, take it easy. Eventually like swelling go down and headaches will subside. And, fortunately the last 6 days, 7 days, I've been feeling much better.
Okay.
Finally started training again, getting out on the trails, moving in the mountains and just kind of feeling back to normal. Cause that was super frustrating. Cause it's like, damn it. Like not only did I fail at my attempt without O's, but then, I get back home and it's still screwing with me, messing with my head. And it's like, and I was, I talked about trying, doing the best I could with making good decisions. and it just kept going through the back of my mind, like, fuck, man, I hope I didn't push it too far to give me, something, a serious long-term affecting injury,
Right.
which luckily, like, it looks like I didn't, but once swelling goes down, like I said, I'm feeling better now, and yeah, finally getting back to training and kind of more of a level headspace.
Well, that's good to hear. Is that common with people who are out there for a long amount of time, who summit Everest, who attempt without oxygen? Have you ever heard of anything like this before?
No, I haven't. And honestly, I don't know. I've kept in contact with a few of the other, buddies on the expedition, and, they've been good. They're tired when they got home, but they were able to get back into training. And I definitely, I've never talked to anybody else who went through the same exact scenario that I did. I think it'd be quite hard to find somebody who has. But I don't know.
Sure.
It just kind of, I think it made me realize a little bit more kind of how far out there that attempt was, and like, yeah, maybe I did push my body a good bit, and and it's just still trying to recover from it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're feeling better, dude.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
just an incredible story, man. I mean, I have loved every minute of this, and I'm just sitting here on the edge of my seat. Like, I loved it all, man. And I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. Is there anything we missed in the story? Do you think we covered it all, or I just want to
Mm,
make sure we capture everything?
yeah, and I mean, it is hard. And it's hard to cover, right? Like, in a couple hour conversation, 6 weeks or 2 months. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, that pretty much sums it up. Went out there, hung out on the mountain for a few weeks, and came back home.
Come on, man. You make it sound so easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. How has your family reacted? How has Michelle reacted? I mean, I've had Michelle on the podcast, and that we had a great conversation while you were away. But I'm sure everyone missed you, and everyone is glad you're still alive. But yeah, what's it been like?
Yeah, no, like I said, my Michelle, family, friends, everyone's incredibly supportive, especially while I was gone. I can't, believe the amount of work and effort that my, you know, family put into, taking care of things and doing things for me while I was gone. And then coming home, yeah, everyone obviously very excited, you know, um, happy that I summited for sure, proud that I summited, but I think more importantly, just, happy I made it back home kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, friends, great seeing them. And, I'll tell you, man, like, I definitely have to say, like, I talked about early on, may not have been able to do this if, so many people didn't just donate out of their pockets to help fund this trip. But it it really blew my mind while I was gone, the amount of support that I got from people. Not only social media, but I had my Garmin InReach link, up, and so I would just get texts from people I didn't know or people I hadn't seen in 20 years. My hometown elementary school, they did this whole presentation on my attempt. They did pamphlets, the kids made signs, summit signs for me, they made a
Wow.
huge banner for me, coming home. And like, I've been back home, my hometown, in 20 years, like since I left school. And just to still see that amount of just kind of pride and just small town, country town, like supporting each other. Like, that hit me. That was pretty heavy. And it really took me back to see that much love and support kind of come from people.
Mhm.
And it wasn't even, beyond just the, hey, good luck, we hope you summit. But I was getting, the same type of text, like, hey, how are you doing? Are you okay? Get back safely. Like, real, real communication, like really kind of looking out. And it was pretty neat to see, man. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you see any more big mountain projects in your future? Or, I mean, I know that you're also an ultra runner. Like, do you have a preference? Would you rather run long distances or climb the biggest mountains in the world? Or, I mean, you just climbed the biggest mountain in the world. And I hate to ask what's next, but like, how do you top that? What is next?
Yeah, yeah. I guess like right now, the only thing I have on the calendar, I have a Sangre 200 miler in
Mhm.
September. So I'm going to do that for sure. And then right now, really just kind of working back into it. I definitely need to get back into running 14ers, get back up to altitude here. I need to finish out these 14ers. Um, I I do really enjoy big mountain climbing. I enjoy high altitude, high elevation. My I learned that my body does perform quite well
Mhm.
there. But one thing that I have to be very cognizant of now is because I have now had a high altitude injury with the cerebral edema. That is a very real injury, and there have been multiple climbers who have had haste and then went back in later years going to extreme high altitude and ended up dying from
Really?
that, just because your body, whether it's an altitude injury or like say a cold weather injury, frostbite, hypothermia, things like that. Same thing with extreme heat,
Mhm.
like heat exhaustion, heat stroke, things like that. If it happens to your body, you become more prone and it's more likely to happen again in the future.
Mm.
And one of the thing, with cerebral edema, you can feel altitude mountain sickness coming on. You get a headache and then maybe nausea or vomiting, stuff like that, and it's easy to kind of return and egress from. But the thing that kind of caught me off guard with my haste, with my cerebral edema, is how fast it came on. Because had I felt the onset kind of building up to that, before I blacked out, I could have adjusted.
Mhm.
But it happened so quick, because like through that whole time, I wasn't even, like there's a dexamethasone, there's Diamox, these altitude sickness medications that people take to help them adjust to high altitude. I didn't take anything. I didn't need it. I
Mhm.
didn't have headaches. I didn't experience any of these side effects. I was fine. I slept great. But it came on so quick. I think it's something that I have to be very smart with, and
Sure.
how I uh, kind of move forward in the future. There are definitely other mountains I would like to climb, but for right now, I think it's safe to say probably take some breaths and hang out at home and enjoy being with Michelle and let
Sure.
her really kind of catch her breath before I
Sure.
start throwing out something else wazoo. Yeah.
How old did you say you are, Jason? Did you say you're almost 40?
Yeah, I actually turned 39 on the mountain.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a happy birthday. Do
Yeah.
you think in terms of age, like I'll get to a certain age and I'm going to have to slow down? Do you think in the future, or are you still pretty present and moving forward, or what does that look like for you?
I I don't see myself ever getting, to an age or like retirement where it's like, okay, I'm just gonna chill. For me, you know, one of my biggest fears is ever becoming complacent or stagnant
Right.
or just uncomfortable with where I'm at. And that's not to say that I'm unhappy with where I'm at. That's just saying that I found, um, for me mentally, and as a individual, as a team guy, as a husband, brother, son, whatever, like I am better in all of those areas if I'm constantly trying to pursue something or better myself, improve myself. I kind of, especially with what I do, one of the most dangerous things that an individual can do is feel comfortable. Like, I've been mountaineering for 3 years. I've got it. I'm good. Oh, I've
Mm-hmm.
been doing the military thing, couple trips. I've got it. I don't need to train. I don't need to work. I don't need to push myself anymore and become complacent. And it becomes pretty dangerous.
Right.
And for me, I just, I find happiness from that. And I know, like, for example, if say I'm trying to prepare or I'm pursuing, say, a big race or a big event, I notice it also um, raises my overall positivity and my outlook on life. And I not only do I want to better myself for this event, but I want to be a better husband. I want to be a better soldier or a better instructor. Like, I just want to be better. So I don't know. I guess I just kind of look at that like, probably just keep pushing this thing until the wheels fall off.
I love it, man. I love it. Um, One of the final questions, this one came from Facebook, is I have a friend, his name is Scott, and I don't know how old Scott is. I would guess he's probably mid to late 40s, early 50s, but he said that he's had a dream of climbing Everest since he was in his 20s. And, life moves fast and you're working every day. And this guy's really active and he's got a lot of, trust me, the guy's a badass. He's got a lot of things he's doing and he's moving forward. But he asks, like, as a late 40, 50-year-old man, like, how do you make this dream possible? Like, it almost just seems like a pipe dream to him. Like, how does he make it happen?
Yeah. And, you know, first and foremost, if it's something that he wants and he's willing to commit to and devote himself to, he can absolutely do it and get it done. Like, there's no doubt. Our lead guide, David, he's, I want to say he's early 50s. Um, we had multiple climbers that were mid 50s
Mm-hmm.
on our expedition. Like, age, it's very similar, like, in that sense, to the ultra community.
Yeah.
Like, I've definitely learned, you know, um, as I've gotten older, you learn so much more about yourself, your body. Mental toughness comes in, and learning experiences, getting beat down and building yourself back up. But then, even just for the long duration endurance aerobic focused stuff, like, a lot of people come into their prime and perform very, very well, well into their 40s,
Yeah.
50s,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
like, so I don't really look at age necessarily, like, is that much of a hindrance, for
Mm-hmm.
something like that. That, the biggest things are obviously definitely training and experience in the mountains, being technically safe and proficient. And then you have the logistical piece, how, funding and all of that stuff. But I mean, I don't know. I think if you want to do something, if you commit and you just put everything into it, and you have to put yourself out there. Like, you have to know, like, yeah, this is pretty out there and there may be a chance I fail, or maybe I can't get this off the ground or can't fund it. But if you have something you're passionate about and you want to do it, fucking get after it and go get it done. Like, you can do it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Just listening to you say that made me think of just one more thing. So, like, while you were on the summit and you blacked out and you had to take supplemental oxygen, was there ever doubt in your mind? Did you ever think, I may not summit today? Or throughout the entire project, was there ever doubt in your mind?
There's definitely, at that specific point in time, there wasn't. I knew I could summit, but I knew it wasn't top priority to me. Like, I would have been totally fine if, David or somebody would have told me, hey, like, you're unsafe or this or that, or I recognized, like, I just can't safely negotiate this stuff. I would have been absolutely fine turning around, coming back down. Now, where I will say there was absolutely questions in my mind, all the way building up to it, attempting without oxygen on whether I could do that or not, because people died this year on the mountain. There's, an individual who died of extreme exhaustion and then had, I don't know if it was an aneurysm, they had something cerebral happen at Camp One before they went on oxygen. And
Wow.
and then I mentioned the avalanches and strikes and all these other things, and there's so many unknowns,
Mhm.
so much risk that goes into that. Um, yeah, I had no idea, and it was quite intimidating. Those 5 days after my second rotation, when I was sitting at base camp, trying to recover before my summit bid, it was a constant battle with me every day. Because of course, I'm listening to audiobooks, so I'm listening to Into Thin Air, for the 17th time by John Krakauer, and
Krakauer, yeah.
you know, right. And I'm listening to, and I have other books and stuff I'm listening to, but I'm just constantly putting myself through this, trying to completely envelop and surround everything into what I'm attempting to do. Because that's kind of, for me, it's not just, the physical training and nutrition, hydration, it's my psychological perspective, my state of mind. Like anything I go after, for me, I found that I have to do a 100% whole encompassing approach to whatever my objective is, and
Mhm.
become a lifestyle goal instead of a short-term check the block thing. It's like, no, everything in my life revolves around this. I'm going to read, I'm going to learn, I'm going to, whatever I can to wrap my head around this. And for those 5 days, it was a constant, it was a psychological battle, because I knew what could happen. I knew what could go wrong,
Mhm.
and then, like I said, that the day of camp 4, when my climbing partner decided to go on oxygen there, and then I was going to kind of push up by myself with lockbup, that was I had to put myself into a pretty, not a dark mind state, but a pretty aggressive, like, yeah, things could get pretty real, but
Mhm.
like we're kind of get into it here. And yeah, it's definitely a lot of question, a lot of unknowns and uncertainty for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you touched on the mental aspect of it there, which is obviously hugely, I'm just vastly important for a project like this. And I just think of some of the harder things I've done in my life, and the mental just thought and preparation that I put into these things beforehand. And tell me if it's the same with you as it is with me, but like, I am picturing every single instance and every single outcome, and how it's going to, how the ripple effect is going to affect the rest of my life. I'm picturing not only accomplishing this goal, but I'm picturing failing this goal, and what that's going to look like, and just every outcome and every possibility. If a storm rolls in, if I have frostbite, if my Sherpa gets injured and I'm carrying him down the mountain, like I'm literally, like I would be picturing everything. Is that kind of how it is in your mind?
Yeah, it absolutely is, especially like with the military background. Planning is so critically important for us. And so contingencies, we will sit there for days and weeks and just break down, for as much as we can brainstorm anything and everything that could possibly go wrong.
Mhm.
It's going to go wrong. How are we going to mitigate that risk? How are we going to adapt to it? And how are you going to continue mission? And
Mhm.
for me, on this, yeah, that's exactly what it was. Like everything has to be so systematic and thought through and dialed and prepared for. Like I said, the gloves and the socks things, I can't tell you, I probably took, you know, 8 or 10 different pairs of gloves with me on this expedition, because I knew the different temperatures, the different types of climbing, snow, weather, wind coming in, high altitude. Those socks are Michelle laughs at me because they're really expensive. But I had to try them out on the mountain. And so like, yeah, they're battery operated socks, right? Well, even lithium batteries at high altitude and extreme cold, they die. So these pair of socks are supposed to last for 12 hours. Well, I tested them out from camp 3 to camp 4. They lasted me 4 hours. So at first I told myself, nope, not taking them on my summit bid. And then what I ended up doing was figuring out a way to keep the batteries heated and warm with chemical hand warmers. And then I purposely layered my my pants to where I could both unzip pants and get to the batteries to change them and replace them, but they were covered and protected, keeping and storing this heat. And then I purposely left Camp 4 without turning the socks on because I wanted to extend that battery life. And I was systematic. It's like, okay, my toes are cold, my toes are numb. Okay, now back to the arch of my foot is numb. Everything was numb. Cool. Now I'm going to turn the batteries on. They work, but it's like these things you think through, and you have to plan, and you have to have the foresight. And I think, we go back to the experience in mountaineering and mountain climbing and that mountain sense that I mentioned earlier. That foresight has to come from experience.
Totally.
That's what makes me, a bit apprehensive with people kind of attempting that mountain without having that experience, is because they don't have, maybe some of that foresight, and obviously, like, this was my first attempt at a big mountain, so I don't have all the foresight, but I was quite fortunate with my job now and my background to be able to mitigate, a lot of the risk, or as much as I could see anyway. And then communication is so huge on an expedition like that. You have 15 other people with you, plus 2 guides, plus your Sherpa, being able to talk to people and allow them to brainstorm, and, this open dialogue, to where you're all just this team environment trying to get everybody safely up and down the mountain. That helped a lot. It was critical. Yeah.
I'm so glad you shared that part about the socks, dude. That is awesome. And I'm guessing that your attention to detail wasn't just in the socks. I'm sure that was to every single piece of gear that you're carrying. And just like you're planning, you're hoping for no surprises. Everything is going through your head in the weeks and months leading up to this thing, so that when you get out there and you have frostbite and you just lost a finger, and you're still going to go for this thing because we ain't dead yet. If I have to crawl to the top of this thing, we're going to keep going. And that's why, I don't know, man. I love it. I loved every second of this, dude. It was a great conversation.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me on again.
Of course.
I knew it'd be a great conversation. Awesome, dude. I can't wait to link up, get some trail mileage in together.
Yes, sir.
And I think we talked earlier, before. Are you going to be at Sangre?
I'm going to be at Sangre. I'm still not sure if I'm going to be running, because I've had a running injury for going on a year now. And I just had some other health issues and just spent the night in the hospital recently too. So it's a little bit up in the air right now, but I'm still training. I'm on my bike almost every day, and I'm just starting to get out for some hikes and some little runs. So, but even if I'm not running, I'm definitely going to be there. 100%.
Nice.
Yeah, man.
Heck yeah. Well, I hope it's before that, but definitely look forward to meeting you and actually hanging out together. Yeah,
dude, 100%. And one more quick last question. Green Beret Racing, I know that your project is already done, but is there still a way for people to donate to that, or what's that like?
Yeah, absolutely. And please do check it out. Instagram, Green Beret Racing, go to the website homepage, greenberetracing.org. But like I mentioned, while I was gone, we have roughly half a dozen new athletes now.
Right.
They've got mountain bike races they're registering for, races anywhere from, I think, like a 10K up to ultras. And so it's like finally getting to a place where we can start getting more guys involved into this, and getting them outside, either in the mountains, running, shooting, archery. We have guys in photography, just anything that they're passionate about, they can get after. But yeah, like this was just my trip. This is by no means the end of it. I was really hoping this would kind of just be the kickoff and the start for it. Just because it's a very different organization in that, most of us are all still active duty, and it's just an incredible opportunity to still be serving, still be on active duty, and have this this other community, this camaraderie that we have of taking care of each other and helping each other, get out before, guys get into dark places, or they don't know where they're going to, what they're going to do, where they're going to go. And we're just really trying to get ahead of that curve, and it's working. And it's awesome to see more and more Green Berets come into the organization. It's great.
And just to explain to people, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but Green Beret Racing is supporting people with PTS or with injuries, and we're just helping them with whatever their passions are. Like you said, if you want to get into photography, we'll support that. If you want to get into ultra running, we're going to help support that. Is that kind of what they do?
Yeah, definitely. And, post-traumatic stress, everybody's quite familiar with that, but we've really, especially, and over the last, I don't know, few years, the awareness around traumatic brain injury has increased, significantly. And it's not, with our community, you definitely have, like, say, direct blast injuries, but what's really happening, and I've even learned with myself, there's, repetitive concussive events that happen. We're firing shoulder fired, rocket munitions. Every time you fire something, that blast is right by your head. You drop a mortar round, it's right by your head. We start doing CQB and shooting stuff in houses and buildings, and we're blowing doors, blowing breaches. That's right by your face. And what they're finding is these repetitive blasts over time are absolutely causing, traumatic brain injuries. When I've talked to some folks with my stuff, they ask me, like, well, how many have you ever been knocked unconscious? Like, are you kidding me, bro? Like, do you know how I grew up? Like, yeah, I've been knocked unconscious. And they're like, well, then military and stuff. I'm like, yeah, dude, and then how many times? Oh, okay, this many times. Have you ever had concussion? Like, yeah. But it's becoming more and more prevalent, and it's more been widely talked about finally, and kind of coming to the surface. And more importantly, like, guys are starting to be able to, talk about it. Like I mentioned, earlier, I never want someone to view me as the weak link. So for the longest time, like, nope, fine, no issues. Like, no matter what's going on, like, got a job to do and carry on. But, after enough time, things start to surface, and, and what they're really, things I'm learning now is a lot of the signs and symptoms of PTS and TBI present themselves quite similarly. The same, depression, lethargy, constantly being tired, and these different, short temper, whatever, these different symptoms, signs and symptoms. And then there's also with us operational stress, which is the day-to-day, right? So now, like, we're talking about things too that's not just, solely related to Green Berets. We talk about operational stress, even post-traumatic stress, TBI, like, law enforcement, first responders, medical personnel. My cousin, he's a wildland firefighter for 20 years now. The stories and things he has done and lived through. We actually had a great conversation right before I left for my trip, and we're both dealing with a lot of the same situations. It's everywhere, but we're, fortunately, very fortunately for me and the community I'm with, and what GBR is trying to do, like, finally making it okay for guys to, like, hey, dude, let's go have a beer. Let's have a talk. Like, what's going on, and you're getting past that stigma, that kind of, you really seemed to be there for me anyway, really through the earlier part of my career.
Yeah. Which is huge, man, which is very important. And I can't get behind that anymore, man. I mean, I highly support that. Listen, dude, it's been an honor to have you on the show. I really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your story, not only with me, but thank you for sharing it here, man. I really appreciate it. And of course, you're welcome on the show anytime. And I can't wait to share some miles with you. And like I said, just an honor to have you on, man. It was a pleasure listening to every second of this.